level 212 chords. And this is part 1 of CAGED for rhythm guitar. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take our CAGED chords that we've learned up to this point, both major and minor chords, and we're going to apply them to the 1, 6, 3, 7 chord progression in B minor that we created in the previous level. And so where we've been playing lead guitar over the backing track, we're now going to play rhythm guitar over the backing track. And we've got an infinite number of ways to do this because of our CAGED system. And so we're still going to be playing the B minor, G major, D major, and A major chords, but we're going to employ all the shapes from our CAGED system to give us an infinite number of possibilities for playing rhythm guitar. This chart summarizes all the CAGED chords that we've learned up to this point. You should know all these shapes because you practice them every single day. We're just going to apply them to our backing track. And as you know, the most important note of these chords is the red square. So anywhere you put the red square becomes the name of the chord. So let's take our B minor chord. That's our first chord in the chord progression. We'll use that as an example. And let's say that we want to play the E form of a B minor chord. So you want to use this shape as a B minor chord. All you have to do is move this red square to the B note on that big E string. And so right now it's on the 2nd fret. All you have to do is move it over to the 7th fret, which would be somewhere around here. And if you play that shape, starting on the 7th fret, you will have the E form of a B minor chord. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there it is. That's a B note, and we build that E form off of that shape. And you have the E minor form of a B minor chord. Now, if you want a different sound, you can choose any of these other shapes. So if you wanted to play a B minor chord using the C form, all you have to do is move this red square here on the B string to a B note. And so that 4 or 4th finger in that red square needs to be moved to the 12th fret on the B string. And if you do that, you will have the C form of a B minor chord. It'll harmonize over that first chord of the chord progression. The second chord of our chord progression is a G major chord. And so we can use any of these shapes here to play the G major chord. All you have to do is move the red square to the G note. So let's take, for example, the D form. All you have to do is take this red square here and place it on a G note. Right now it's on the 2nd fret. All we have to do is move it to the 5th fret, and that's a G note, and you would have the D form of a G major chord. And that's the D form of a G major chord. There's your red square right there. That's a G note, and then you build the shape, the D shape, off of that root. And you have a G major chord. If you wanted to use the A form of a G major chord, all you have to do is move this red square on the A string to the 10th fret. That's a G note. So if you play this shape here at the 10th fret, you're going to have a G major chord using the A form or the A shape. It's going to harmonize with that second chord. And you can do that with any of these shapes. And that's the A form of a G major chord. We're just using that A shape with the root at the 10th fret. That's a G note. And you end up with a G major chord using the A form. And the same rules apply to the D major chord, our third chord of the progression. You can use any of these shapes to play a D major chord. So let's say we wanted to play the G form of a D major chord. All you have to do is move this red square here to the D note. That would be your 10th fret on the E string, and play the shape, and you indeed have a D major chord using the G form. And that's the G form of a D major chord. And we call it a D major chord because the root right here, that's the red square, is placed on the 10th fret on the top E string. And then we just build our shape off of that, and then we play it, and we get a D major chord using the G shape. And then your final chord is the A major chord. So if you want to use, let's say, for example, the C form of an A major chord, then all you have to do is move this little red square to the 12th fret. That's an A note. You play the shape. You then have the C form of an A major chord. It's going to harmonize over that fourth chord of the chord progression. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to put the red square right here on the 12th fret, and I'm going to build my C shape or C form. And there you go. That is the C form of an A major chord. Now that you have an idea of how this works, I encourage you to be creative. And you can just randomly pick whatever shape that you want to use for each chord. But I do have a couple of strategies that can help you in training, and it sounds pretty good too. The first strategy is playing horizontally by keeping the chord roots on a single string. We do that by keeping the red squares on a single string. So let's take the A string for example. Let's say we want to play all of our chords with roots based on the A string. And the first chord is a B minor, so what you would need to do is to play the B minor using the A form. You can't use any of these other forms because the squares are on different strings. But we can use this one. And so that would be at your 2nd fret. There's a B note right there. In fact, this chart is showing you a B minor chord. So you'd play this shape. And then our next chord is a G major chord. And so you go over here to the major chords and you look for roots on the A string. So here's an example of that. So here's your A form. And then to make this a G major chord, you need to move that red square to the 10th fret. And then you would have a G major chord with the root based off the A string. Our next chord is a D major chord. And so for the sake of changing shapes, you could move that shape right there to the D chord. And you would do that by placing this red square on the 5th fret. And if you do that, you would have a D major chord using the C form. And it works because we're playing the root on the 5th string, or your A string. And then finally, we have an A major chord. And to do that, we could take either one of these shapes here. I'm going to go ahead and choose this shape here. And so if we move that red square to the 12th fret, we would have an A major chord using the A form, and that would keep our root at the 5th string, or the A string. And that was our chord progression. We started off with a B minor chord with the root on the A string, and that puts us there at the 2nd fret with the root. And there's your B minor. And then I chose to go all the way up to here, which is the 10th fret for the G chord. This is the A form of a G major chord. That keeps the root on the A string, so we have horizontal movement across the fretboard. Gives us an opportunity to use that shape. And I suppose I could have gone down to the A form of a D major chord, but I wanted to be difficult. And so I went to this shape, which is a very tough one to get to, but it's good practice for you. Once again, the root is on the A string right there, and that's the C form of a D major chord. And then we have another root here at the 12th fret. That's the A major chord using the A form. You could have used the open A as well. What matters is root movement is going across the A string, and that gives you an opportunity to work on your shapes on that string alone. And the result is horizontal movement of chord roots based off the A string. All those chords had roots based on the A string. And then another example would be to place all the roots on the E string. And so for example, if we needed a B minor chord with a root based on the E string, we could check out these two forms. The G form and the E form both have roots on the E string. So we can play the E form of a B minor chord by placing this red square at the 7th fret. And you'd have a B minor chord. And then your next chord is a G major chord. We look up here at our major chords, and we have two choices. We can use the G form or the E form. And I think the more friendly form is going to be this E form. So by placing that red square on the 3rd fret and playing this shape, you will have a G major chord with a root based on the 6th string. You're moving horizontally with those roots. And then we have a D major chord. We look up here at our major chords, and if you wanted to use this shape here, you could place that square there at the 10th fret. And then you would have a D major chord with a root based on the E string. And then finally, our A major chord, well, it's a major chord, so we look at our major CAGED, and we can choose one of these shapes. I would go with this shape here, And we can play the E form of an A major chord by placing that red square on the 5th fret, and then it would harmonize with that A major chord on your backing track. And the result is you have horizontal movement of the roots across the E string. And that's our chord progression with roots built on the top E string. And so the first chord that I chose was the E minor form of a B minor chord. And that's because the root is here at the 7th fret. That's a B note. We make our E minor shape. And there you go, your one chord. And then we're going to go down here to the G major chord. I chose the E form because it has a root on the top string at the 3rd fret. Sounds pretty good. And then here I've got the E form. I'm going to go ahead and keep that form for the D major chord. Although I could have gone for the G form because it also has a root at the 10th fret. So either one works for you. I thought that the E form was easier to play, so I went for it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and maintain that E form for our final chord, which is the A major chord. Once again, I could have gone for the G form of an A major chord. You can choose either one. The main thing is that you're getting the repetitions and you're working on root movement on a single string. Remember, you can play these in any random order that you want to as long as you play the right chord. But this is just a strategy for practice to get you moving horizontally across the neck and employing all the forms that you've learned. And you can use the same example for horizontal movements across the D string. And to do that, we really only have one choice when it comes to the B minor chord, and that's going to be the D form. We could use the E form, but we've already done that. We do have a root here on the 4th string, but we also have a root on the 6th string, so that's already been covered. So we'll stick with the D form, and so if you move that red square right there to the B note, and that's going to be your 9th fret, then you will have the D form of a B minor chord. I think the shape would sound really nice on the high end of the guitar there. And then the next chord is a G major chord. Once again, we don't want to use our E form, even though there is a root on the D string. We've already done this shape. So for the sake of practice, we'll stick with the D form. There's your root there on the D string. We can move that to a G note. That'd be your 5th fret. So just move this square to the 5th fret, and then you would have the D form of a G major chord. And then you would do the same thing with the D and the A chord. So if you move that red square right there to the 12th fret, you would have the D form of a D major chord. And if you move the red square to the 7th fret, you would have the A major chord using a D form. So you have lots of horizontal movement on that D string. And here's our D minor form of a B minor chord. We have the root here at the 9th fret on string D. And that's going to give you a B minor chord. You can play a little arpeggio over the top. These types of shapes sound pretty good with arpeggios. And then we're going to go down here to the G major chord using the D form. Once again, we're using the D form because the root is on the D string. That's the point of this exercise. And we have a G major because there's a G note right there. So, and then we can go all the way up here to the 12th fret. That's going to give us a D major chord using the D form. And you could have also used the open D string as well. And then finally, we have the A major chord using the D form. So we're using D forms on all these movements. We really have no other choice, but it's a great exercise. Once again, you can strum these exercises to the count, or you can play arpeggios. I like arpeggios with these shapes because they're the upper end of the chord and they harmonize really nice over the top of a strumming pattern. And there you have it, horizontal movement with roots on a single string. If you employ this strategy, you should be able to get all these shapes into your practice. The only oddball is the C form, and so you may want to drop this in on an occasion for that B minor chord, and you can do that by placing this red square on the 12th fret. That'd be a B note, and that'll harmonize just fine over that one chord. Now this is just a strategy. You can use any of these shapes over any of the chords, for practice. So you can do that in a random way, or you can employ the horizontal strategy that I just gave you. The main thing is that you're using all these shapes to harmonize. We will be talking about vertical movement of the roots over the next backing track in a future level. But for right now, this is a good way to get you started in employing all these shapes. That's really what I care most about, is that you're using every one of these shapes in your practice.